All right, hello. Welcome to RhapsodyCast, the podcast where we write a short story in the fiction format and tell them to each other. My name is Matthew.
My name is Nate.
And since this is the first one, I guess we should introduce our how we've gotten into fantasy. So, Nate, how have you gotten into fantasy?
That's a hard question.
Okay, well, how about this? I got into fantasy at a young age, reading books, of course. I've read a lot of fantasy novels, like most of the sort of truth novels.
There you go.
Half of the Lord of the Rings stuff.
Only half.
Yeah, no. After the Fellowship, I kind of got tired. I loved The Hobbit. Hobbit's probably one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah, I read The Hobbit in like 4th grade. It was awesome.
It's a great book. I've read some of that guy that died. He wrote a bunch of books.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of Terrys in the fiction world.
Robert Bingle-Bangle.
Actually, Robert Jordan, yeah. It's close. Some of his stuff, I read some interesting magic stuff. Fantasy movies, I love them. And I've played Dungeons & Dragons since I was 8.
Yeah, and you got me into Dungeons & Dragons.
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, so we've always enjoyed fiction that was fantasy-based. And then a podcast called Fantasy Fiction came out, and it inspired us to perhaps write more, because we're creative people. Like I went to school for writing, he went to school for art, and so we figured, why don't we start our own podcast?
Yeah, just as a disclaimer, I am terrible at writing. Matt writes way more than I do, so we'll see how different our stories could possibly be, because I'll probably break all the rules and Matt will follow them way too strictly.
The rules aren't that important. All that's important is that you have fun. We're just doing this to have fun. We hope you have fun, because we're going to enjoy ourselves. And if you're having fun with us, then you'll listen, and that's what we want.
Yeah.
So, with that, I guess we should begin. I guess this will be a good time to say our format. So the way we're going to write these stories is one of us will come up with a shared prompt. Like in this one, it was gambling dens. And that can be as specific or as general as you want, because we have to share it. So like if Nate's like, you got to have a chicken named Gary who likes gold. Like we both have to have that. Although, of course, naturally, the more specific you get, the less different our stories are going to be. But on the general shared prompt, as specific as you want, and then each one of us gives each other one unique prompt that's supposed to be very general, so that we can take it how we want. So gambling dens shared. My unique prompt for Nate was lizard men. His unique prompt for me was bag of holding, which I didn't use those exact terms because I'm not sure if that's owned by Wizards of the Coast or not. So I just went with extra dimensional bag that can hold larger than the outside.
Right, a TARDIS bag. You can call it that.
Yeah, no, that's not copywritten.
That's not copywritten.
Okay, so here's your story about lizard men and gambling dens.
My story is called There Was Lizards One Time and the Gambling Den Happened. Okay, here we go.
That's solid. I like it.
All right. A faint song started to play outside the seedy gambling den. The seedy gambling den is in quotations because it's spelled D-I-N-N, because it also is an N. So it's like, it's a gambling den, and then it's also an N.
What? Like din as in sound.
What? Like, you go to the inn, you
inn.
You heal all your HP.
It's the gambling inn. I like it. It's a pun. It's good.
It's terrible. The song started out low and grew stronger. Nice. Bam! Bam! Two lizard men walk through the kicked-in door of the city gambling den. Their song playing at full force now.
Like it follows them?
Yes.
That's like their theme song.
Yeah, they have a theme song.
I like it.
All right. You feeling lucky today, Skull? Yeah, Brash. I changed one of their names. Anyway. Yeah, Brash. Let's roll the bones, Skull said, tossing up dice carved from the knuckle bones of a dragon. Hee, they chuckled. No. Out. Get out right now, shouted the innkeeper. We don't want your kind around here. What do you mean, lizard people? Isn't that specious? I mean, spiciest? Brash blurted out. They were clearly dumb. I don't mean lizard people. That kind of your kind is always welcome here. That's a hard sentence to say.
You wrote it.
I wrote it. I'm talking about loud, obnoxious, ancillary characters that only serve as lousy comedic relief. Now get out of here before... If I felt like it, I would edit a lion roar behind my own roar.
We don't have that kind of a budget.
Yeah. Roar! Brash and Skull leaped on top of the nearest blackjack table, billowing out their frightening roar. Oh crap, I forgot you were also giant horrifying monsters. I guess you can come in, said the innkeeper. The two lizard men took a seat at the blackjack table and called for drinks. 7 gallons of fantasy brand fantasy ale, please, they roared in unison.
I bet that's pretty good. Sounds refreshing.
Yeah, I would drink all the ale. You got money, the dealer asked. Skull chuckled. Do we have money? Do we have money? Do we have any money, Brash? Sure we do. Brash reached into his tattered leather jacket and pulled out a single copper piece and placed it on the table. Laughed the dealer. What am I supposed to do with that chump change? Whatever you normally do with money. That's the way gambling works, right? You start out with little and you win a whole lot. Something like that. Okay, let's start. The dealer placed a 10 card down. Hit me, said Brash. The dealer placed a 4 card on the table. Hit me, Brash repeated. The dealer placed another 4 card on the table. 18, sir. A small crowd of patrons started gathering around the table for no reason. I mean, this scene would be tense if he was playing with, like, big money, but it's just a copper piece. Brash stared down the dealer, who was looking rather bored. Hit me, he said. The dealer slowly placed a 2 on the table. 20, sir. A small gasp was heard throughout the crowd. That's the reason why the crowd came, because I wanted them to go, oh.
Yeah, I mean, you hitting on an 18, you're a crazy man.
I know. Okay. Brash stared even harder at the dealer, who was now trying not to make eye contact. It was getting awkward.
This is intense. This is like the climax of a George Clooney movie.
Hit me.
Oh.
In confusion, the dealer flipped a final card on the table. 28. Bust. Duh. Hit me. How do you play this game again? With that, the dealer took the single coin from the table. Roar! The two flipped the Jack Black table and started wrecking up the place and grabbing all the money.
The Jack Black table? Like,
did I say Jack Black table?
You said Jack Black. Like, it's
yeah,
we don't have that budget.
No, it's like it's got his face on where like normally it would just be the table.
That's a weird detail they added now.
They had a very big printer. Anyway,
Jack Black's a thing in your realm.
Yeah. This is great. Even when we lose, we win. Haha, Brash said. Hey, you Lizzos. It's like a racial slur for lizard people.
But like it's the kind you would see in a Saturday morning TV show that like would be acceptable to put on it for our children's programming.
Right. Exactly. The two monsters looked behind them. They saw a human, an elf, a halfling, a half-orc, and a dark elf standing in formation.
Oh, dark elf.
They got all of the, races. They got to be inclusive.
Dark elf. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, man. You two ruined our poker game. Now it's time to pay your debts. That was terrible.
Well, maybe he's a paladin. That's a very paladin line.
Yeah.
I don't know why he'd be gambling, but I mean, paladin line.
The human leader quipped, "Gambling debts, that is." Whoosh, 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 went the hands of a lady elf, all kung fu style. If you think you can come in here and trash everything like the big giant monsters you are, well, you're wrong. So wait for some new thoughts to come. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Shut up, you, Skull roared. The lizard started swinging wildly in a mad rage. Everyone was punching and fighting and stuff. There was this one time the halfling went under Skull's legs and kicked him up the butt. Damn!
Ouch.
After several sweet minutes of Nido Kung Fu type action, the 5 adventurers returned to their original formation. This is over. It's morphin' time, the leader said.
Oh, I get it. I see where we're at now.
The 5 warriors held their hands in the air, and wind began to swirl around their feet. The swirls grew into basically a tornado around them and began to change. Yeah, and they began to change. I don't remember what I wrote. When the tornado dissipated, there they stood. The 5 adventurers formed one big pile of people parts. Arms and legs stuck out of a central mass of flesh. 2 huge eyes pushed folds of skin away as they opened. A mouth with gnarly teeth did the same. Rargle! The new monstrosity's speech sounded as if 5 voices were speaking at once. You mess with the horns and you get the bull.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. The flesh ball started inching towards the lizard. Slowly it crept, since it was a big and disgusting, and it didn't have very good mobility because it was a big ball of flesh. The 2 lizards started to lunge towards the icky thing. Yeah, I like that term. Icky. I think that's a good term to describe that.
I would describe that as icky if I were in that room, I'm sure.
But before they could connect their attacks, a huge flash of light stopped them. A man appeared between them. He had a huge bald head, which towered over a very tiny body. Rargle, Lord Zordis. That's a hard word to say. Zordis. The monstrosity spoke. We thought you were dead. Adventurers, Zordis's giant head said. I've come from the future to stop you from making a terrible mistake. Thanks, Matt.
I'm sorry.
You ruined my flow.
I'm sure that was not picked up by the microphone.
With that, he opened his mouth on his huge head and swallowed up the fleshy, mangled adventurers. Mmm, delicious.
Whoa.
Yeah, man, he was like...
Those were his adventurers.
Those were his, and he just ate them up.
Okay.
Because they were delicious. Whoa, Brash, let's get out of here. Wait, Zordis said. You 2 will become the most important figures in history. But whatever you do, you must stay away from, the Death Walker. Yeah, that guy. Brash and Skull looked at each other in amazement. You know what else? What? I'm a bad liar. Zordis opened his big flappy mouth and swallowed the 2 lizard men whole. He reflected on the events and was sad that no one even threw a pie. The end.
Oh no. I don't know who this Zordis guy is, but he's going around eating everyone.
Yeah.
It's not a good way to make friends.
No?
Well, unless he might have befriended the big fleshy lump pile if he hadn't needed it.
Yeah. Well, he was like their leader, I think.
Yeah, no, that's the implications.
And then he came from the future.
Wow. I wonder
eat them.
I wonder what it's going to be like there in the future.
I don't know how far in the future. I think he just wanted to eat them. He might have not even come from the future.
He might have been on another part of an island somewhere like, oh, I could eat a fleshy lump pile.
He seems like a jerk.
Well, I mean, he likes pie fights. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Interesting story.
Yeah.
It's different than mine.
Okay.
Hopefully mine's as good as it. Okay. My story, I named, I can't remember whether it was The Beginning or It Begins.
I like It Begins better.
I think it was It Begins.
I
wanted to have that implication that this is the first episode, but also what I'm setting up here will be the beginning of things that happen at a later date, maybe.
Okay.
It was a cool, calm evening in Gooston, and as he sauntered down the side of the road, Armani White relished the slight chill in the air. Armani was a goblin gambler, smooth talker, ladies' man, and some suspected a con artist, though no proof of that claim could be found with the living. This goblin had skin that was pale enough he could almost pass as a human, were it not for his short stature and the slight green twinge to his skin. He had black hair, which was slicked back, a quill-stroke thin mustache, which ran the entire length of his upper lip, and he wore his favorite black suit, which he had a golden AW embroidered on the right lapel. Nice. Of course, the suit wasn't his favorite because of the fit or the choice monogram stitched into it, but for the other customization he had tailored into it. Sparing a quick glance around the sparsely populated thoroughfare, Armani's hand quickly retreated up his sleeve and into the extra-dimensional bag carefully sewn in there. Magically enchanted to hold significantly more inside than the outside would suggest possible, the bag was an invaluable resource for occasions such as this. Deftly, his fingers ran over the items in the hidden pocket, taking inventory. Most important were the magically enchanted dice that would always find themselves landing on a 7. But the goblin also had stored a small bag of coins, a dagger, which was more for brandishing to ward off bandits than actual use, and a small glass flask containing a random potion or elixir. Or nothing. Armani had received the flask as part of a payment for some debt years ago, but he had no need to drink it. In fact, he had even forgotten what was supposedly did. In case of emergency, he thought, absently. Before long, Armani found himself outside the casino, or at least he thought he had. Usually casinos had flashy magical lights and issued joyous sounds from their open doors. The goblin missed the flash of the big casinos, but had somehow gotten himself banned from all of the reputable gambling establishments. Oh well, he said with a sigh, I'm sure this place has plenty of money to give me. And with that, he pushed through the thin, unassuming door into the unmarked building. As he entered the building, Armani was assaulted by the acrid smell of stale cigar smoke, mixed with the sweat and depression. Turning his head, the goblin sucked in his last fresh bit of air for the night and blinked away the tears forming in his eyes. A quick survey of the room suggested no one had taken notice of this less than graceful entrance. Better yet, every other gambler was so focused on their own addictions and vices that Armani doubted he could pry their attention away with a crowbar. This pleased him because he had far less obligated to perform his usual ruse. In a more traditional gambling setting, he would go from one game to another, poker to blackjack to roulette or such, making and losing wildly large bets until he made it to the dice table. Once there, he'd make his largest wager yet and magically turn his luck around. In 2 or 3 throws, he'd have more than doubled his initial investment, entertained an ever-growing crowd, and generally aroused very little suspicion. There was no need for games tonight, however, and Armani confidently strode to the dice table, where a gruff-looking orc wearing an eye patch and shabby clothing angrily gathered his few remaining coins from the table. As the goblin passed by him, the orc cast a long, curious glance his way, possibly sizing him up, possibly weighing the pros and cons of jumping the small figure wearing the suit right there and then. Tonight, Armani had every intention of being the predator rather than the prey, so after a quick glance at the orc, barely enough to note his dark green complexion, thick lower tusks, and bald head, he roughly pushed past the larger man and planted himself firmly across from the table attendant. The attendant was a youngish human female. Armani estimated her age at around early 20s, but guessing human ages was a chore he had never been too good at. She could just as easily be 40. He couldn't remember what age humans matured at, if they ever even did. She wore a wrinkled tuxedo shirt with a light browning around the collar and sleeves, presumably from the constant exposure to the tobacco-filled haze Armani was barely getting accustomed to, which she must surely be subjected to constantly. She also sported an orange bow tie, which appeared to be hastily tied around her collar. "Good evening, my lady," the goblin said, offering his hand. Her eyes gazed down at the offered hand, then met his eyes with cold indifference.
Sounds like a creeper. Good evening, my lady.
He's got a nice mustache, a monogram suit. He's trying to be cool. Holding up a pair of dice, she spoke. "Place your bets," in the droll monotone of someone who has held a despised position for far too long. Of course, Armani said, reaching into his suit coat. From a hidden inner pocket, he produced a small, unassuming drawstring bag, the telltale jingling of coins announcing their presence. A quick tug loosened the bag's closure. 10 gold coins spilled out and splayed across the felt table. 10 gold crowns. The hostess's eyes widened, and she quickly looked over her shoulder. Armani immediately regretted this show and cursed himself. "Oh, I'm sorry," he apologized, reaching out for his coins. "I didn't know your house limits. I can decrease my bet." "No," the human woman said, turning back to the table. "No, that amount is under the house limit. It's just," she shrugged casually, "it's more than I usually see in a night." Armani nodded, knowingly. "Well," he said, with a sly smile, "I only plan to double it once or twice and then move on, don't worry." The goblin gave her a wink before arranging his bet into 2 neat piles. "Yeah, sure," she said, picking up the pair of house dice. Armani cringed a little as he reached for the dice. "I hope you are a lucky lady," he said, testing the dice weight, "because I know a number of gamblers who would never throw dice handed to them by the dealer." The dealer rolled her eyes. "Do you need an explanation of the rules?" "I've done this a few times before," the goblin said without looking away from the dice dancing around his palm. The hostess motioned down the length of the tub-like table, signifying that she was ready. Armani gulped, then met her gaze. He nodded, the dice rattling in his loose fist. Armani cocked his arm back, his hand deftly swapping the house dice with the magically loaded dice in his extra-dimensional sleeve. His hand popped back out as his arm rocketed forward, throwing the dice down the entire length of the table. The dice bounced off the lip at the far end of the table before coming to a rest on a 1 and a 6. "7, the dealer announced, sounding a bit dazed. "The house meets your wager." Carefully, she counted out 10 gold coins, any one of which was probably more than her yearly earnings. Armani nodded matter-of-factly as she pushed the coins his way. "Well, well," he pretended to think aloud, running a thumb down the length of his thin mustache. "I guess you are a lucky lady." He moved the new coins next to the others. With a thick smile, he glanced up at her. "Why don't you hand me those dice and we can give this another try," he added.
That's an interesting way to describe a smile.
Thick smile? I liked it. I actually took a little bit thinking about that one and
Really?
eventually settled on thick.
Wow. I wrote my story in 5 seconds. So
I wrote my story over about 10 hours.
Yeah.
A bit mystified and hesitant, the hostess retrieved the dice with her stick and handed them back to the shooter. After a short jingle, he cocked his hand back and going through the same gestures, only without switching the dice. This toss was a little less enthusiastic, the dice finding themselves on a 3 and a 4. "7, she said, pausing a bit before adding again. She stared at the 2 white cubes in disbelief. She blinked twice, then looked down at the small piles of gold coins she had left. She counted out 20 coins and retrieved the dice. After pushing the winnings across the table, she offered him the dice once more. Armani took them and absently rolled them around in his palm. He pretended to weigh them, just as he pretended to weigh the odds of another throw. After what seemed like an eternity to the dealer, the gambler's hand stopped its almost hypnotic movement. Armani closed his hand and turned it over, offering to hand the dice back. "I think that I've tried my luck enough for one evening," he explained. The dealer let out a sigh of relief and outstretched her hand to receive the dice. Her hand stopped mid-journey when a cold, grim voice cut in. "Please," it beckoned, "be my guest." The voice belonged to a dwarf so opulently adorned he fit in with this smoky, miserable atmosphere even less than Armani. The dwarf was easily 6 inches larger than the goblin in every direction, and even though he had a bit of a gut, he still had quite a frightening appearance. Even more intimidating than his sheer bulk was his obvious wealth. Countless gems and gold strands were woven throughout his salt and pepper beard. His purple silk suit was adorned with every accoutrement that it could hold, from golden cufflinks to golden buttons, a golden pocket watch chain, and even a golden lapel pin shaped like a goat's head with little rubies for eyes and diamonds studding the length of the horns. All this wealth did wonders to draw attention away from the 4 personal guards. Each guard wore purple leather armor and had a short sword on their hip. The guards, flanking the dwarf with their arms crossed, were 2 human males and 2 orcish males, their skin colors ranging from dark brown to light green in an almost rainbow-like gradient of deadly force. The dwarf's eyes were locked with the goblins, and after a few tense moments of silence, the dwarf gestured. Armani flinched before the larger man spoke. "Throw the dice," he commanded, his voice calm and even, but held a sharp, venomous bite behind it. "This one's on the house," he assured. Armani took in a large breath as his eyes scanned around. The dealer had a look of pure horror on her face as she stared at him. All the nearby tables had emptied of gamblers and employees. How had he not noticed? How quiet and still it had gotten. Even the smoke hanging in the air seemed to tense up. Armani rocked the dice around in typical fashion, once, twice, thrice. Each shake took an eternity, yet seemed so pointless now. As he threw the dice, he turned to sprint from the table. Immediately he was seized, the dice still tumbling, as the two nearest guards' hands clamped down like vices on his shoulder and wrists. When the dice came up at 5 and a 2, the dwarf nodded, one ring-covered hand running through his bejeweled beard. Without turning away from the table, the dwarf made a dismissive gesture with his other hand. "Take him to the alley and show him how we welcome cheaters and sneak thieves," he commanded, with an eerie calm still stroking his beard. Armani was half led, half dragged through a maze of gambling equipment and out a back door. A blast of cold night air chilled the goblin to the bone. Under any other circumstance, he would have found it refreshing, but it just reminded him of the hard permanence of death. Set on his feet in an alleyway, he couldn't believe that this was where you'd die. One of the humans held him in place, a ham-sized mitt on either shoulder. The other human and one orc shook themselves loose and squared up in front of him. One orc didn't even move. "This grot ain't big enough for 4 grots like us," he declared, pointing a thumb at the goblin, who was at best half the height of the shortest of the 4. He produced a hand-rolled cigarette and lit it with a match he struck across his leather breastplate. He let out an entire lung's worth of smoke before adding, "You 3 rough him up." The one human gave a satisfied nod and launched his fist straight into the Armani's stomach. All of his air fled his body, his face and lungs burning as he struggled to catch his breath. He wasn't given time enough for that before the orc's fist slammed into his face. The impact crumpled his slightly larger-than-average nose and sent a few broken shards of teeth down his throat. Blood poured from his ruined nose, through his mustache, and dropped in drips from his chin. The next blow, presumably from the human, puffed his eye and took from him half of the vision he wasn't even using. He rocked in the loosened grip of the human that barely held him any longer. His body lit up with pain, his lungs still aching for their first new breath. He realized this was his last chance to save himself. Any more punishment and he was sure to pass out. The orc took a running start and made to punt Armani. With what little energy he had left, he lurched and lunged out of the way, the orc taking his buddy right in the groin. The struck human doubled over. Armani wished he could enjoy it, but the surprise wouldn't last him long. With a flick of his wrist, he pulled the small dagger out of the extra-dimensional pocket. Brandishing the dagger wouldn't affect these thugs the same as some timid mugger. As the orc retreated from his accidental attack, Armani lashed out. The knife sliced hands, cut biceps, and even found a soft spot on the orc's inner thigh. As he ran past the smoking orc, he buried the dagger in his calf. Armani ran. After a few steps, he started to regain his breath in sucking starts. When he heard the voices of the men chasing him, he ducked into a side alley. "Over here," a sultry, seductive voice beckoned. Armani turned to see the rounded curves of a female form disappear into a dark doorwell, a stark blue showing in the midst of her raven-black hair. His whole body aching, his pursuers nearing, the goblin had little choice. He followed.
All right, way to go, Matt.
I don't know. I don't know. It's nothing happens. There's no action.
No, but man, that's like a novel. I thought we were doing short stories.
It was 8 pages of short story.
It was a prologue.
Well, that's how I write now.
Why?
Because I want to get published someday.
Right. That's good. That's good. I'm going to keep doing dumb stuff.
I'm going to try to be dumber.
No. Maybe. A little bit.
You decide. You tell us which style you like more. I mean, I've written some dumb stuff in my days.
I've never written before.
That's not true. So that's our stories. We hope you enjoy them. We're gonna keep doing this either way.
Either way.
So it's your turn, Nate. What is the shared prompt for next week?
I want the shared prompt to be a tournament.
A tournament.
Yes.
Okay, and
of
then
any sort.
Okay, yeah, it could be a card tournament. It could be a gladiator event. Any sort of a tournament. Could be Ragic, the Quest for the Spell Dragon tournament, for all you care.
What does that mean?
Never mind, it's a reference that I'm surprised you don't get. Okay, so for your unique prompt, I'm going to give you a animated object that is not normally alive.
Cool.
And your unique prompt for me?
Your unique prompt for you is a clockwork bicycle.
Clockwork bicycle. Okay.
I think I just racked my brain and found the two most unconnected things I could think of at the moment.
I could see it.
I did Mad Libs in my head.
Oh no, that's how writing starts. I mean, you got to begin somewhere.
Yeah.
Clockwork bicycle. I can deal with that.
Good.
No, I'm just kidding.
That was a pun.
So it was.
You said deal. I don't know. We're talking about gambling. You said deal.
Sure. Yeah. No.
That was a pun.
That was intentionally a pun, and everyone listening totally got it. So we thank you for listening. Anyone who actually did listen. We don't usually read things out loud, so this is...
we'll get better at that.
Yeah, hopefully. And we'll get better at writing because we're going to keep doing it. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Of course, we're saying you should get a hold of us. The ways to get a hold of us as of right now, my Twitter handle is @FridleyScent.
Mine is @Adolfo Shabadoo.
And we will probably make a Twitter and Facebook for the show. So when you're there, you'll know how to get a hold of us.
Yeah. Bye.